Hello, and thank you for attending my session at DrupalCon Europe, Beyond 2020, the future of web development, Drupal, and our careers. It's a privilege to be with you today virtually. I'm coming to you from my garage in San Francisco. Very happy to be here and to speak on what we're seeing now and what we think we'll see more of in the future. So let's talk about 2020 for a second. It's been a heck of a year, let's just put it that way. And things are definitely changing quite rapidly. I think this quote sums up the experience a little bit, which is that, things aren't changing so much as they are accelerating. We've been through crises before, which reshaped the future. The crises we're experiencing now is just making the future happen faster. And you can see that with the web and the idea of digital transformation more broadly. It's happening and fast forward. What we're seeing so far, just roughly based on broad estimates is, 65 times the speed of change as what we saw in the decade leading up to this. These are things that have always been in motion, but now that the digital channel, the web channel is, not just the most important, but also in some cases the only channel you have to reach the public, to reach your audience, to reach your fans and followers, customers, constituents. It's vital, it's urgent. And the truth is that a lot of us aren't exactly ready for it. There's a survey that was run early in the year. It's an annual survey run by Forrester Research that looks at corporate websites and says, do they have an excellent, okay, or poor customer experience? And 0% of the corporate websites surveyed had an excellent customer experience. 65% were just okay. But in this environment, is okay okay? I would say no. I think okay doesn't cut it, because we know that 60% of users will abandon a website if there's a bad first impression. And in an era where this is make or break for organizations, that is simply not acceptable anymore. And so for all of us here who make the internet, we are the people who build the web. This really puts us front and center in terms of whether or not we can deliver. It's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of stress, but it's also a great opportunity. And at Pantheon, we've seen a lot of really great things happen in 2020. We've been a part of some really exciting projects. One was a national political campaign here in the States, which is a real heck of a thing. I cut my teeth working on a national political campaign. That's where I first learned about Drupal. Back in 2004. But this is a real thing. You have to respond to real-time events 24/7. It never sleeps. It's always urgent. And in 2020, you're also subject to these kind of nation-state level security threats. And we were able to help this campaign succeed, in a way that we're really proud of, and we learned a lot while doing. And this is a testament to the quality of what we're able to bring to web teams and how we can help them do their jobs better. Another topical example would be, this international biotechnology initiative that we helped support. This was something that was built in a matter of weeks by a small web agency, and they said, "Hey, Pantheon, can you help us take this thing global, with our corporate sponsor?" And we were able to do that with them. This ended up powering a large-scale clinical study, which is going to have a really big impact on things. And it's just, I think, a real example of how we're able to move quickly and sort of take advantage or really, strike while the opportunity exists. And this is something that's being asked across our industry, right? If the future is happening faster and digital transformation has real urgency, are we ready to meet this moment? And that's a question that probably makes people a little bit uncomfortable on some level, but that's correct, right? This is not something which is optional anymore. It's something that is kind of a must-have. And so as we look at this and we look beyond 2020, I want to give you a little bit of Pantheon's perspective and our philosophy on what we think the web is really for. I think it starts with this. We believe that every website has a job to do. Websites aren't just there to exist. They're not just there as a vanity element. They're not just there to be a digital billboard. Websites really exist to deliver results. And the the ways in which websites deliver results hasn't really changed all that much in the past 20 years, right? You're either looking to directly monetize or derive value from your traffic, or you're trying to literally sell something or get people to give you money, or you're trying to fit people into a larger scale process of engagement by getting them to sign up for something, maybe volunteer some of their information so you can contact them later, et cetera. Or you simply have a pure communications goal, right? You don't care whether people give you money or not. You just want to know that you've reached a lot of folks, or maybe you don't care about reaching necessarily everyone in the world, but you want to really engage your community. You're looking for like repeat visitors, daily active users, people coming back to really engage. Uh, these are the types of jobs that websites do in the world, and they make a real impact. It's not just happening online. Web experiences drive real world results, and that's really important. Um, but the truth is, I've been in this business for a long time, as have most of you. Quite often, we're not really focused on these things. We're focused further down in the stack. We're focused on whether or not like our website is um, looks correct, or whether it's up and performant, or whether the latest security patches have been applied, or whether or not we can make a change to the website without breaking it, whether or not we can work with the teams that make the changes to the website without breaking it. Like the actual teams that do this work are very, very often stuck in this kind of lower level challenges of credibility and productivity. And this perspective has been our mission since the very beginning. We talk about web ops now. That's our term for this, but it's really been there from the start. We've been talking from the beginning about putting the humans at the top of the stack, helping people focus on strategic and creative and innovative challenges, and actually getting the goods, making something happen, getting something really tangible out of the work that we put into the web. And so, if I'm going to give you our philosophy in a nutshell, it really breaks down into these three layers of value, this hierarchy of value, where in order to do good work on the web, you have to establish credibility. You have to have your core performance, your core scalability and uptime taken care of. You need a good user experience. You need to deliver something fast to people so that they'll actually not just swipe away and never even see what you've created, right? And then really the challenge that a lot of us get stuck with is this challenge of productivity, right? If we just build something once and get it out in the world, that's not good enough, right? You can't just launch a website, and if you build it, they will come and wait a couple years to do a redesign and launch it again. That pattern just doesn't work. We know that. And the question is, can we get to this place where we're actually releasing changes to the website, we're publishing content frequently, we're iterating on the design and the user experience, and that's how you drive impact. Impact is only possible when you have credibility and productivity under control, and that's when you can be focused on your metrics. You can be focused on the right types of iteration, because productivity without any kind of guidelines, it can be risky, right? If you're just really productive but without any particular objective or north star to guide you, you can kind of just go all over the place, or maybe just run in circles really, really fast. You're moving really fast in circles, but you're not necessarily getting anywhere. Um, and and so when you think about what this means for all of us and what it means for the future of the Drupal project, I think it's really instructive and useful to focus in on what exactly drives impact. And impact is driven by user experience. Ultimately, the website has a job to do. That job has something to do with other people. They're out there in the world. They might be employees, they might be constituents, they might be total strangers. But the point is, the website is for someone. The website is for people to visit, and the what visitors experience is, what's the content? How does it look? What are the interactions? And for us on the other side of the equation, can we measure whether these things are working or not? Those are the fundamental things that help us to drive user experience. And in order to drive those things, we have to be able to adjust. We have to be able to experiment. We have to be able to innovate. We have to do that across design, content, and functionality. And in order to be productive and credible, we actually have to be online. We have to be secure. We have to deliver on people's baseline performance and user experience, needs. And what we've found in our research is that many web teams today, still today, they can't publish in real time. because they either don't have a real CMS, or their CMS is this, kind of Baroque, idiosyncratic, highly complex implementation that only a few people know how to operate. So that actually getting new content live is this burdensome process that requires days or weeks of planning. And even fewer organizations are able to iterate in any way, shape, or form, even in small ways, on the design or functionality of the website. They're stuck with what they have. And they're waiting another year or 2 or 3 for the big relaunch that's going to solve all the problems, which of course it never does. So this is the fundamental crux challenge that we're here to resolve. And as we think about user experience and what it means for us in the future, I think it's instructive to look at our past and think about how we have delivered user experience historically. So prior to there being the Drupal project, when we were first getting started building the web, it was just developers making HTML and putting it on a server, and that led to it being visible for a site visitor, right? That was the kind of basic publishing pattern. And in the early 2000s, we saw the dawn of what people called the quote unquote Web 2.0 era, where you had software that helped people publish more quickly, and it democratized the ability to publish and engage at this level. So very often we talk about Drupal as a technology that made the job of webmaster obsolete, and this is really where it was. Like, you no longer had to have a web developer literally writing things into documents to get them published. You had software which could help you assemble content and templates and then push that out to the web, and that's done a lot of good. It's helped a lot of people, but maybe in some ways, the user experience of websites delivered in this way has started to lag a little bit. It's not quite as good as it used to be. And in part because we have not kept pace with the innovations in the part of the development stack that leads to the user experience, the front end. And so now you have this new pattern where front-end developers actually work on their local computer and they push something up to somewhere in the cloud or on the internet, like usually a CI server, and that assembles a site that's built on a different technology stack. It's really a different set of technologies that drive the user experience. And you have people where the CI server wasn't quite good enough, and so they're actually doing something with a server-side rendering framework. And the same way, it's like being delivered to the site visitor's computer, but it's a different technology stack that's delivering that user experience. Usually there's a CDN involved here, and there's actually innovation happening at that layer too, with edge computing, which might change a fair bit of this. But the PHP world and our CMS world has kind of been cut out of the loop. We know, like in many of these cases, we're not actually delivering the user experience, or increasingly we're not delivering the user experience. And it's useful to ask ourselves what that means. Um, it's also useful to just take stock of the fact that the technologies that have filled that layer, that power a large portion of the web, are not well liked, broadly speaking. Developers don't like these tools that were developed, starting 10, 20 years ago, and not without reason, right? These are mature technologies, but they're technologies that were built on idioms and processes that really emerged in an earlier time. And so you find modern developers, web developers, they just want to work with the HTML directly. They just want to work with JavaScript directly. If they have to use a framework, they want to use a different framework. And it's cliche to say that software is eating the world, but really I think that actually JavaScript is kind of eating the world in a really material way. If you think about all the different user experiences that are powered by JavaScript under the hood, many of the tools that I use on my desktop computer, whether that's Slack or Spotify or something like that, those are just web stacks wrapped inside an application framework. And all the stuff that I'm, clicking on and engaging with, that's just JavaScript driving the interaction and then, emitting the results out to some server somewhere and coordinating the experience. And so I think that there's a very real way in which this wave of innovation that's happening at the JavaScript layer is something that we're already taking seriously, but we have to take perhaps even more seriously than we have been. I would say that JavaScript is coming to dominate user experience. JavaScript-based development is coming to dominate user experience because it is the actual technology that people interact with more and more often. People don't interact directly with PHP, and so we have to actually meet that moment and embrace that reality, because that's what's going to deliver the most impact. That's what's going to get delightful experiences. It's important to note that JavaScript is not coming to dominate kind of core business logic functionality. There's a lot of complexity and work that goes into content management that has to do with, managing the state of data and workflow and organizing taxonomies and connecting data models. These are things that you can do with JavaScript, but it's by no means the dominant technology for doing that. It's the dominant technology for actually figuring out what it is the end user's experience. This is not news, right? I gave my first presentation on headless Drupal 5 years ago at DrupalCon LA, and it was kind of tongue in cheek and like, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening, and whoa, let's check it all out. And it was sort of in the spirit of like, this is very interesting, like this is kind of cool. We should probably pay attention to this. And I think in the past year, circa 2019, at least for me, I made a decision that this is a technology trend that will define the next decade of the web. The line between what's an application and what's a website is getting blurrier and blurrier and blurrier every month. And a lot of the trends that people have pointed out that are long-running trends, like thin clients and network computing and all this other stuff, they're actually starting to come true. And then that's going to be something which will completely evolve and in some ways revolutionize or disrupt our lives, our practices, our careers. And I think in that light, it's important to actually be realistic and pragmatic and note that like the headless Drupal approach hasn't been viable for most teams. It's actually not a great success story. You can do it, but it actually isn't. It's a pretty high risk approach. There are a lot of success stories and case studies around headless Drupal, but there are also a lot of stories where people started down this road and a year and a half later, they're kind of licking their wounds and back on a monolithic implementation. And I think that's in part because of it's early days. There's a lot of moving parts. There's best practices are not yet well defined, but also it's in part because the way in which the Drupal project has approached this hasn't really appropriately prioritized the needs of the front end developer and through that lens, the needs of the end user. Drupal theming has always been kind of a niche skill set. It's always been a little bit of a second tier status within the project. And then when you take it to the next level of, well, we'll just have an API for other people to use, the approaches that have been taken haven't been wildly successful. Like the core REST API isn't an unqualified success, right? Because it just exposes all of Drupal's internals over an API, and a front-end developer doesn't really want to work with that. It doesn't really give them the benefits they're looking for in terms of quick iteration and like easy development patterns. And I'm not here to just like, be critical of the Drupal project, right? We're all working really hard on this. I also have criticism for people that are approaching this from the opposite side. So you have like the rise of the Jamstack, and this is going to change everything. It's the new way to build stuff, and it has high performance and great security, and it's scalable, and it has an excellent developer experience. And these are all true things, but there are massive fundamental flaws with this perspective on solving real world problems. The first is that it just says, hey, content isn't our problem. It's an API. It's over there. It's on the other side of a discipline boundary, meaning we don't care about content creators. We don't care about content workflow, and basically that's a problem for someone else to solve, which is fundamentally limits the applicability of the approach. It actually kind of undermines that notion of scalability, because if you can't actually publish, again, without going back to a literal developer working on their own markdown files, or a developer who knows how to exercise this API, it's a problem. Right? It limits the scalability. Most people can't adopt this. And then down there at the bottom, like no server or backend. That's a great thing to think of, but actually it just means like we'll just ignore half the stack and assume that someone else, again, we'll assume that someone else is solving that problem. And so I think this is there's a lot of amazing development work that's happening in the Jamstack and really cool tools. But the fundamental worldview that basically says it's front-end developers' world and everybody else lives in it just isn't going to cut it. Because actually, when you want to build a real website for a real organization solving real problems, when you're trying to drive impact, you have to include these other components. And then the tools of the Jamstack world end up being, one of several components that someone has to figure out how to integrate or implement. And it's not all that different from the headless Drupal problem, right? Ultimately, a solution that meets the broad use cases of the web, it can't be a science experiment. It can't be a rickety contraption that glues together 7 different pieces, because that's not very sustainable. It's too high risk to be adopted by a large number of organizations or teams. It's just not going to actually meet the moment in terms of giving people what they need. I think that we are at this stage now with this new development approach where there's a lack of a complete solution, right? You have innovators and some early adopters finding great success with next generation front ends and decoupled architecture, but you also have a lot of people that have tried and failed and crashed and burned. And you have a large amount of the web usage of the world just not ready to make that leap, right? So we're in this classic crossing the chasm moment, which I think the current state of Jamstack is insufficient for, and the current state of headless Drupal is also insufficient for. And that's really the moment we find ourselves in at Pantheon and how we're looking towards the future. And so if I'm going to, speculate, like what will things look like further out down the line, and what are we going to do to help us get there? Well, I think if I was to imagine the building blocks for web experiences in 2025 or 2030 even, it's something like this, right? The atomic design systems are clearly a growing trend, and not every small website needs to have their own design system, but the idea of picking up a pre-built design system that you could tweak a little bit to insert your specific needs into, and having that as something you could use to actually deliver user experiences across a variety of channels is something that's not just going to be for giant enterprise corporations. This is going to become more and more the norm. You're not just going to have a style guide. You're not just going to have a theme. You'll have a design system. And then the content management system's job becomes, thankfully, a little bit more narrowly prescribed. So we can focus on what we're good at, right? Which is basically helping people do content workflows and assemble things from the content management, from the design system rather, to bring together elements from the design system and elements of content and build, these user experiences. But the user experiences themselves will not be rendered by necessarily the same tool that does the assembly. That will be done by a tool chain that's native to the user experience. So today, React.js is quite, and the frameworks built on it are kind of running away with the market. I don't know whether they'll still be the ones that are doing it in 2030, but something like that, something that's native to the user experience will be delivering that last mile. And you think about these things as the kind of separation of concerns, and it's actually quite attractive, right? As a developer, I like the idea that you can kind of figure out which domain you're working in and focus on solving those problems. The problem with all of that today, if you imagine this in the future, is that you still have this challenge of complexity. You still have this challenge of it feeling like a science experiment to wire these things together. If I was going to imagine what like a chapter-based nonprofit or a big education institution or a larger company that had multiple websites would actually face if they were going to go down this path, it's tricky, right? You've got your design system, you've got content management systems, maybe more than one, maybe different flavors, and then you got your different front ends that are serving these end user experiences. And maybe there's some other components in here too, where like you have something specialized for e-commerce, for instance. That could also be part of it. And you think about all the ways these things are connected, and it starts to look a little bit hairy. Like, how do you actually manage all this stuff? How do you actually connect all these things? How do you actually make sure when something's not working quite right that you can figure out where the flaw actually is in the design? And it reminds me a lot of what we went through, back in the day when we were starting when we were just getting to the point of moving from physical server and network infrastructure to the cloud, where you had like all this complexity, all this stuff that was put together piece by piece, and was a total nightmare to manage and made everyone super nervous, right? This is not a world that anybody really wants to live in, but this is web ops. This is the web ops challenge that we're here to solve, to make all of this actually seem sane and scalable and easy to control and quicker to deliver value from and more inclusive for more members of the team. So what are we doing at Pantheon to solve this? Well, we're doing, first of all, we have this perspective, but more importantly, we're building tools to actually address these challenges. And the tools that we're coming out with quite soon and actually have available now, depending on what your use case is, are a tool we're calling Edge Sites and a tool we're calling Decoupled Bridge. And Edge Sites is the static site generation path, right? So if you have a front-end framework, like say Gatsby, and you want to build that with a Drupal backend, and you want to put that all under one roof. You don't want to split it across, your own server and Netlify, or Pantheon and Vercel, or putting the CMS on another cloud provider, and then having your own CI workflow that deploys out to Amazon, right? You actually want one provider, or you want to give your customer or your client one provider that can kind of do it all for them and maintain those components, so that you don't have a bunch of exposed wires lying all over the place. That's something we'll be able to do for you very early, starting in 2021. I think it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be interesting. It'll be exciting. And we also have the decoupled bridge use case, which is basically the same value proposition, but rather than building static websites, we're focused on the idea of a dynamic Node.js runtime. And this is because there are a lot of cases where you either have a large amount of content and you can't go through a static build, or even if you have a manageable amount of content, it's changing pretty rapidly. And again, the idea of a static build that introduces a bunch of lag, even if you optimize it to the nth degree, just isn't that appealing. So the idea of a CMS that can be connected to an active Node.js runtime to serve the end results, that's something that we're actually delivering to customers now, and will continue to develop and improve over the course of 2021. The teams that we're trying to serve with this, and where we're trying to add some special value, like just running a node box or running a CI process, isn't that exciting. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring together the world of DevOps and marketing. That's really what web ops is all about. We want to have the tools that developers need to be super productive and never have to worry about scalability or this other stuff. And we also want to make sure that the people that are actually worried about publishing, the people that are worried about the design, the user experience, the results of the website, that they're first-class participants in this entire process. I think that differentiates us a little bit from some of the other folks that are out there doing this, where they're just focused on the front-end developers, or they're just focused on the business owners. We're trying to bring those groups together, because only by collaborating together can they actually deliver the real impact that websites are there to do. That's our philosophy anyway. So if you want to learn more about this, we have a landing page for this. There's a couple of sign-up forms you can go through. We're delivering this to customers now and building it actively for 2021. I think this is going to be very exciting. I think there's a really bright future for Drupal as this CMS for more powerful use cases, where you actually do need workflow, where you actually want structured data, where you want to be able to manage your website like a giant database, but you might actually want that database to be exposed to users through a more modern user experience stack. That's the talk that I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. You can reach out to me directly for questions or roast me on social. Because this is happening at 1 a.m. my local time, I have recorded this in advance. My colleagues will be around to answer questions in real time if you have them. I hope you have a wonderful DrupalCon Europe, and I look forward to seeing you in person next year when we have this event again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Drew Gordon. I am one of Josh's colleagues, and I'm here, and I'm happy to answer questions if anybody's got them. As Josh mentioned, it is quite late in the morning where he is, and so he opted to, again, record in advance, but I'm happy to answer anyone's questions if anyone does have them. There's the question box in the interface, live Q&A. Oh yes, and I see in discussion chat, Ajit, I think I was also observing that the audio was, kind of in and out. So hopefully people were able to to understand that. But actually, I'll say this to everyone: if anybody would like a copy of because it is a recording, we can send you that separately as well. So if anybody would like that, you can message me, and I'll put my email into the discussion chat as well. And I'm happy to connect everybody with the video if you weren't able to catch all of it, and or if the audio was too difficult to understand. If anyone has a question, please go ahead and type it into the event chat, the event live Q&A. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Buddy, it is just before 3 in the morning, so I'm also getting a little bit tired. Thanks for stopping by. And what time is it where you are? 10:45? 11:45? $9:45. All right. Sophie, hi. Once again, if you're just joining, Josh just gave his presentation, but he did it via recording, and so I'm here to answer any questions anyone may have about that. But I would be happy to send, if anyone is interested in the recording, I would be happy to send it to you so that you can see it. What can we tell those of you who came late to the session? So Josh was talking about basically Pantheon's take on where web development is headed, and TLDR, it looks a lot more like JavaScript powered front ends, and getting us all to a place where people can effectively collaborate online as cross-functional teams. So not just the Jamstack is, basically heavily developer centric. If you want to edit content, like that's kind of not the problem that's being solved for, and that's not great for the people who need to get results with a website. And conversely, like Drupal theming is always been sort of like a not super, it's very much a niche thing, and it's never been thoroughly respected and thoroughly sort of invested in, and so it's a kind of a difficult dark art, but seeing a world where these forces are merging is increasingly where Pantheon thinks things are headed. That sounds great. Yes, we can add the recording to our booth, I think. Dakel, I think, is that something that, so we have with us the Representative Kwoni. I'll work on that. Awesome. Okay, great. I'll work on getting it live here. Awesome. Raquel, is that something that you could just magically do for us?
You mean to post the recording?
Yeah.
Sure, I can. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm just also seeing, Imri, what's the last compliment you received from one of your clients? My goodness. I don't know personally. I don't know. I'm sure if we can go look at Twitter, we get, people are on the Twitter all the time talking about Pantheon. Generally, people are quite happy. Thank you. I appreciate the smiley face. I wish we were able to do this all in person. It would be great to see everyone's smiling faces and have a chance to get together. Let me make sure I'm looking at all the right places here for questions. Yeah, and hugs, absolutely. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions. So thank you all for coming by. It's wonderful to know that you're here. I hope you all have a great day. Happy DrupalCon, everyone. And I hope to see you around at additional sessions or back at the booth. And everyone stay safe, stay sane, and have a great week. Learn lots of stuff and go forth in Drupal. With that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off.